We're about to have back-to-back two giants of poetry in this city and in this country. So I'm going to start off by please welcoming Judith Rodriguez. Please come up to the stage. And then I get to play talk show host here, which is fun. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Judith. I just thought before we get into your poetry, we might like a chance to discuss and explore a little bit about your work. You and I were talking before the evening started about the work you've done and you're doing in exploring different forms. So would you like to tell everyone a little bit more about that?
Oh, well, it was amusing to hear oneself described as a giant when I must have produced the smallest book by a poet this year. This book is a rather odd item. It has 3 genres within it. It has a long ballad in 5 parts. It has an historical account of the woman that the poem is about, and it has lyrics at the end because I could hear the voices of some of the characters. So, very odd thing that it is. And what's more, I've been thinking about this or working on it or finding out facts about it for something like 40 years, which is shameful. But there you are.
So was it something that kind of went away and came back over 40 years?
In the early 1970s, I took my kids to see the old Melbourne jail, and they had, 14 yellow death casts of the heads of people who had been hanged, all hitched up by the rope, of course. And among them were several women. And there were 3 women hanged in the 1890s. And one of them interested me particularly because she was a victim of unrestrained fecundity of women, the fact that contraception was not possible. And she was a baby farmer. And what's more, she was a young woman sent out from England, a remittance woman with no remittance by her parents. And she landed up in the Great Depression. So her case was a very sad one. Anyway, I went on thinking about her for some time, and I got diverted onto other colonial subjects, actually, a few other colonial women. And it was only recently when I realised that there was a series of books about old Melbourne that I could see as in the context of an actual publication. I thought I'd better hurry up and get this done. And by now, of course, there were a lot more facts in the libraries. So there you are.
Great. Well, look, I won't hog any more of your stage time. I'm sure we'd all like to get into hearing your poetry. So I'm just going to do a very brief, I probably should have done this before you got up on stage, but anyway, I'll introduce you. Judith Rodriguez's first collection was published over 50 years ago, and she continues to have work published up until this very day. She is known for poems about women's experiences, and in 1986 was writer-in-residence at Rollins College, Florida, an experience commemorated in her 9th collection, Floridian Poems. In 1989, she took up a lectureship writing at Victoria College, which in 1993 became part of Deakin University, where she continued until 2003. The same year, you collaborated with Australian composer Moya Henderson on the opera Lindy, about Lindy Chamberlain, which premiered at the Sydney Opera House, with Robin Arch on the play Poor Joanna in Adelaide in 1994, and your most recent book, The Hanging of Minnie Thwaites, which I think is what we're going to hear from a lot tonight, is a long ballad and lyrics accompanied by an historical account of its tragic subject. Judith teaches poetry writing at CAE and works for International Pen. So, I'm going to get off stage and take it away, Judith.
I like the idea of starting with a poem about poetry, the sort of thing that non-poets say, poems about poetry. Well, if you were a plumber, you'd want a poem about plumbing, wouldn't you? Yes. Flares. It could be the paper you write in the dark. It could be the squeaks emitted by your mother after the fashion of a squeeze doll, ducking the burden of response. It could be shadows falling uneven in the passage, longer as you walk, or the glass grey swell of the Pacific that lifts you, triumphant in your young body, with trails of seabed sand and bubbles under a grey sky at Kirra. It could be your dad skipping you with huge skips past Allen and Starks down Queen Street. Breath, flares, perdurable gusts. The next true poem. I decided I'd sort of just go through the things I have in alphabetical order here and read the ones that are perhaps some about women, the ones I kind of like. That business about, what is the next true poem and what is the next poetic moment, as it were, I found a very strange one once. When you're taken out of time, out of all the schedules, out of the timetables you've made for yourself, that's often very strange. And I had one on the border crossing. It was the Brenner Pass between Italy and Austria. As if the God of both ways raised a finger. A flash, they said, the travellers looking forward, faces caught in the rictus of that vision. After the crack of it beat, grinding obedience of wheels that slowed and slowed, hopes of the booked connection at Munich dispersing in sun and silence. To sit, perched on the line between sun and shadow, the carriages trailing back to morning and Italy, relief engine uncertain, the American family in the compartment making anxious forays in between certainties as who to talk to. Stillness on the tracks, the voices fall away. Exactly at the top of the pass in pale sunshine, the plane in Frankfurt missed. New futures beckon, smiles in chance cafes, river walks, a bed turned down. The god's eyes quiver. Out of the valley an engine fusses. We're moving back. We're moving. Once again, Troy can burn. Homes waiting. Bookings. The connection. And the miracle of German railways. I caught the plane at Frankfurt. Has anybody ever missed a plane? It's a wonderful experience. Oh, here's an odd one. I haven't written any others about being... I have written one other about being in India, about a Shakespeare reading in India. But this is just one from the newspaper in India. The Corpse Carrier. Reporter Mukherjee is telling Reuters this very unusual life story, how a boy fled from a dad and stepmother situation and found corpses. The child is 10 and home voices sour. Suddenly the door sill lies down. The faces of babies in the house say nothing. Anyone could play with them. And in short, an ancient necessary trade makes him an offer, and off he goes, content as no one should be, curious that too, and they pay him. He has always been the corpse carrier. No one contests his way on the road, his right to the pyre of flies. In the end, he doesn't need to drink, doesn't smell a thing. It's him they fetch to shrunken bone dolls and daubs of rotting gut, bloats grounded on riverbanks. Well to windward, a policeman stands pointing, then leaves. Leave it to the carter. The bodies are all robbed, all penniless. They have paid the ancient executioner's fee. He simply hefts. He never tires of listening to what they say. I was with my mother for 5 years before she died, and that was a fascinating experience. I wasn't sure I'd ever write anything about it, but in fact I wrote a couple short ones, which I'll read now. One of them is called Safe. My mother actually was very lucid most of the time until she died, which made the moments when she wasn't quite lucid and had hallucinations about a fire on the opposite wall, a very alarming one, of course, all the more upsetting. We were kind of relying on her to hang on to the lucidity, but of course she didn't always care enough. Safe. My mother is crouching at the back of her mind. She has not many ideas to go on. Her interests have faded. Her sisters are gone. It is long since she securely recognised the daily carers, daughter and granddaughter. She rouses to rummage the cupboards, all hers, for anything to do. Snatches a cleaning rag, sticky tape, cards she can't read. Asked, she says she wants scissors. Asked why, she does not stay to answer. Wakeful, she has left her walking frame. Tape tangles her fingers. It is 4:30 in the night and nothing in her indomitable body or her own warm home will be allowed to kill her. And this was a strange dream I had. The dream, I watched above the bed in which I lay, and on a bed, sheeted, my mother, dead 10 months now, stirred. But she is gone, I said, and saying it returned still mired in care to where my mother, stilled with barely a word left from the 100 years she sealed away. O strange arrival, seeing death reversed, the sheet tensing with movement, the unspoken demand we resume together, she being wakened. A wondering horror held me, and her hair, as never in life, was mine, and I lay there, creature of her imagining, as at first. Since this is a rather dark moment, I'll read this one called The Life Inside. A little house, heard from the yard, fresh voices at the door, a little house. The shelves that fill, the cups along the board, a little house. 2 chairs pushed close, the crossword page filled out, a little house. Heard from the bed, the hot wind all night long, a little house. The photos stare, the phone shrills once and stops, a little house. Heard by no ear, the messages repeat, a little house. I wrote a few about asylum seekers and terrorists. In the year 2002, in the Dandenongs at the community centre, they held a display about asylum seekers and terrorists. There's some wonderful cartoons by Spooner there. And Gary Smith and I did a recording, a tape for it. This is one of the poems I read. It's called Knife in Head. In the heads of millions it is found, knife in head. The barb of injustice nests there, it turns and festers. This man has queued for days at the checkpoint. His family needs food and medicine. On the other side is work. More buildings for a rich nation. On his side, foreigners snatch land and build. Foreign troops in tanks plough up streets, homes, livelihood, memories. In the wrecked market, anger enters at the eyes, invades the brain, seats the blade, drives the point home. Nothing can staunch his shame, but the dead he'll claim, the body count. Knife in head. This girl is a student. In her angry city, Her brothers are out throwing stones at the tanks of the occupying forces. For them, no chance of safety, good years travel. Her people have stopped listening for those rumours of a soundtrack from a receding planet. Her cousin 1 year older became a dead hero. People in her street have been killed. She straps the explosive packets under her breasts. For her, no wedding, but a name in the lengthening list of martyrs. Every day will heap dust on her sacrifice. The bus pulls up full of the justified, people with high fences, people who can travel everywhere. She moves up the aisle and sits next to a woman with a child, knife in head. I'm a great admirer of original anthologies where you feel the editor has read and loved every poem. One of these is a little anthology called To Say the Least. It was assembled, it's Canadian poets from A to Z, edited and introduced by P.K. Page. P.K. Page was an imposingly tall, well-presented woman who wrote very good poetry. And I last saw her in a bookshop in Victoria, British Columbia. She was rather like Margaret Jones at the Sydney Morning Herald. I once sat at a table with her and Margaret Whitlam, and it was like sitting with two towers. Anyway, I did a little poem called To Say the Least, named after the anthology. Dear PK, when I understand it's you I read in the pages of your anthology, you loving the singularity of each tiny poem, you savouring, devising their delicate array. I remember the day I met you at the launch of the children's book at a Victoria, BC booksellers, tall and fine among ordinary mortals. Dear PK, not of course gone while memory's in play. And I embrace the hope again to be read in my works, large and small, and also where self offers, ushering forward best friends and words treasured, to say the least. Oh, my clock's working. Oh. Yeah. I'll read a little set of poems called Tristia, Sad Things, which is probably going to increase with the years, you know. Things noted, things seen. The unhappy woman is gone from the corner table. Two pretty kids are mouthing each other's conscious faces for the friends they've brought along, and they laugh. I wish the woman, huddled still in her corner, in the heat of her bitter thought, over her bitter straw, uncaring, hair snagged in the rumpled tufts of her coat. I misread that, and I wish the women were huddled still in her corner. There is loss irrecoverable. The dog will not come back. The dog, lapped in her blanket under the sour grass, will not come back. The old plagues are back. Long and long now we have been spared that easy distinction. Us in the light, you lot. But the floods are up. There is talk of looting and major fraud. Need and locusts are back, and strange deaths. The gods are tithing. Old plagues pull at our shirt ends. This one's about a travel friend, Venetia. I've never been able to find out where Venetia is, though she was a Victorian. I met her in London. She had a flat, and she allowed me to... I thought flats were generally very dull, all white and fawn, you know. I said, the ceiling ought to be painted. She said, paint it. So I painted it, a dreadful botch. And I thought she was quite wonderful. And we met later in Athens to hitch Yes, at Athens, but we went on to Istanbul and then we hitched across Turkey to Beirut because she had to go to a wedding in Melbourne and she had the plane booked from Beirut.